To me, yes, I do want imperfection in the art that I engage with. In fact, there is nothing less inspiring than art, and especially music, that is just like overly perfected, overly polished. I think the technology that we have now is, I mean, I'm talking about music specifically, is so advanced that we can just like perfectly lock everything in place so everything is exactly on the beat. And to me, that's just boring. There's nothing inspiring about that. So for me, yes, I do like it when there's little, rather than call them imperfections, I'd rather call them nuances. I prefer when there's a lot of nuance in the music, especially, I listen to. And of course, that goes for, I guess, any medium of art as well. I like it when you can see the little imperfections and brushstrokes for paintings, or little bloopers that were probably caught but just left in of movies. I like those rough edges because it's something to grip onto. You can't, necessarily grip onto something smooth and perfected in the same way that you can grip onto something with edges and just has a little bit of that like sandpaper quality to it. Alright, I've talked about this album a little bit on my channel before, but this album, Metallica Kill 'Em All, is just such a good example of what I'm trying to say here, because, I mean, this is not like some obscure indie band. This is Metallica. This is the metal band. But some of these songs are rather unpolished, actually. They're not bad by any means. I fell in love with metal because of this album, actually. But there's some songs on here that it's just like, how did they think that was okay? Not even okay, it's just like, how did they leave that in? It's almost like it takes balls to leave it in. These little things, these little mistakes, James Hetfield, the singer, just straight up misses some notes. They're not in tune. But it doesn't matter that they're not in tune, because the energy carries, and that's what gives it, I think, the life. People make jokes about Lars and his drumming in Metallica, but I mean, the drum parts are performed well here, but you can tell, like, there's some nuances. There's some parts where he is just a little bit late on a kick drum or whatever, but it's like it doesn't matter almost. It's that imperfection that I really like about this album. I'm going to shout out one other album before I get to my next point, but I don't have this one on CD, but it's Spit by Kitty. They're like a 90s nu metal band. I think they're the best nu metal band to have ever existed. Maybe that's a hot take, but that album, Spit, is basically what I talked about with the Metallica album. Just so much nuance and imperfection. And I think a lot of that comes to, I mean, it's part of it is a skill issue, I think. They were young teens, pretty much, or maybe older teens. I don't know. They were in their teenage years when they created that album, and, well, for better or for worse, I think you can tell. Now, I did say that this is one of my favorite, at least, metal bands and nu metal bands of all time, and that's not for the reason that you think. I mean, when we think about good music, we expect the drums to be in time, we expect the singer to be sounding good, we expect the guitars to, again, I guess, be in time. But, I mean, the drums are really good on that album, but the singing is pretty rough. It does sound like a 17-year-old girl screaming into a microphone. I'm not gonna, pretend that it's not that, but there's something so real about it that their later records, I think they just got better, which is good, but it couldn't capture that raw feeling of, I guess, what it was like to be a group of teenage girls in a scene full of, like, 30-year-old men. And I love it for that reason. So I just did a lot of gapping about my own personal taste. But a lot of people say they want imperfection in their. I'm gonna stick to music because that's what I know, I guess. But they want imperfection in their music. I think people are tired of just super what's called quantized. That's when it's like super on the beat. It's edited to be super on the beat. Super quantized music and like just super auto-tuned, perfected, smoothed out, just like ultra polished music. People are sick of that, or so they say. But when I ask them like their favorite songs or favorite bands or say favorite artists or whatever, I feel like I do get answers that are either like retro, like older, 80s, 90s, 2000s, or if they're more contemporary, then it is like just super edited and polished and quantized, like I keep saying. The reason I bring up like retro type of music is because, especially in the 80s, I think, the technology wasn't really there to perfectly edit recordings to like an immaculate sheen. But the technology was still good enough to create a very polished sound, if that makes sense. So that kind of left room for nuance and just a little bit more of like that human expression in the recordings because you couldn't go back and fix it in post. I've talked about this album before a little bit, but Thriller by Michael Jackson, if I were to count on my fingers how many times he is just a little bit out of tune with the singing, I would lose fingers because I wouldn't have enough fingers because he regularly hits notes out of tune. Just a little bit flat or a little bit sharp or whatever, but it's like it doesn't matter almost because the performance is still good. And as you go throughout the decades, I think more technology was introduced, but it was still in a rather primitive state. You don't get the tools that we have now, obviously. That's just the progression of technology. So I think, at least, there was still a lot of nuance within recorded music. Classic example, right? The Black Parade. I don't have the right cover flipped. There you go. The Black Parade. Even though this has a very like polished and pristine sound to it, I think you can tell that there is humanity, I guess, behind it. And that comes down to, again, the nuance of the performance. I think I lost my point a little along the way there, but the point that I'm trying to make is that there is a difference between perfect and good. I think that people often correlate perfect with good, and therefore good with perfect, but there's no connection really, I don't think. I think that something can be good, and something is really only good if it's not perfect. I was saying about Michael Jackson, right? Like, that's a good album. Thriller's a good album. I think it's it's justified in the sense that, yes, this is a really good album. I understand why it sold really well. But it's not perfect. I just thought of this example, like hypothetically, right? Let's say a singer is singing a very emotional song, maybe a very personal song to them, and their voice kind of breaks during whatever line they're singing. No, that's definitely not perfect because they messed up. Their voice broke. That's not what it's supposed to sound like, but you can almost feel that in your soul when their voice breaks. Because, no, it's not perfect, but that's what makes it human. I think some of the best concerts I've ever been to were just local shows that all the bands are just like college kids and they're playing like punk rock type of music. And those kinds of shows are, again, just some of the best shows I've ever been to. No, I don't think that they're particularly good at singing or their instruments necessarily, but it's that energy that they bring in spite of it that I really just love. I actually think that if they were just virtuosic musicians, it would kind of lose a little bit of what I loved about it so much. It's just pure energy, pure expression, and you're doing away with any fear you might have of potentially sucking. And I mean, they did sound good. I'm not gonna say like they were good if they didn't sound good, but again, there were just little bits where it's like, that someone else could have played that better. But again, it doesn't matter to me. I feel like I'm struggling trying to make my point here because I can really only talk from my experiences, and I don't really want to point fingers and be negative towards others because other people are allowed to like what they like. I have no control over that. But if anything, maybe as an audience member, I think we should try to see the humanity in whatever art we engage with rather than strictly judging it. Maybe that's a whole other video on itself, like, are we too quick to judge things? But there you go. Perfection is boring. We're all just humans.